But then my presentations are pretty cinematic. It's almost like a play. I take you through this journey, I make you feel things. And I'm interacting and kind of reacting also according to the way you look at it or you look at me. Since I couldn't do that, I suggested to Martin that I don't record a presentation, but we do the next best thing that we love doing. We produce about 20 to 25 short form videos every month. And so instead of recording a presentation, we produced a short film for you. The film that you're about to watch, it's called The Image and the Idea. It was produced in the last 5 days with all the girls in my team working through Women's Day as well. So watch the film, have a thorough cinematic experience. Let me know what you think. You can reach out to me on Instagram, LinkedIn, or any of those social platforms. And I hope to be there next year at light+building at Frankfurt. And for now, let's watch the film.
There is a strange silence hanging over architecture today. Not the silence of peace, the silence of something that once had force and now feels harder to name. There was a time when architecture was argued through theory. Ideas had weight. Drawings were not just presentations, they were positions. A building belonged to a worldview: modernism, postmodernism, critical regionalism, deconstructivism. Agree or disagree, at least there was a battle being fought. But somewhere along the way, the center of gravity shifted. Theory did not vanish, it was dispersed into branding, sustainability rhetoric, software culture, social media, project management, performance language. And slowly, almost without us noticing, the image stopped serving the idea and began replacing it. Then AI arrived, not as a tool alone, but as an exposure. And in a matter of seconds, the machine could generate atmospheres, facades, moods, worlds, seductive worlds, impossible worlds, beautiful worlds. And with that, one uncomfortable truth became harder to avoid. We had already started mistaking the image for the architecture. AI did not create this weakness. It exposed it. It industrialized it. It held up a mirror to a profession already drifting towards spectacle. This is the real crisis. Not whether AI can generate form, not whether it can make a beautiful rendering. It can. The crisis is whether we still know how to judge, how to distinguish spectacle from space, atmosphere from performance, a seductive image from a place that can actually be lived in. And in lighting design, this becomes even more dangerous because AI can fake the appearance of light with astonishing ease while knowing almost nothing about glare, adaptation, luminance hierarchy, maintenance, controls, or the slow choreography of perception through time. A machine can simulate a mood. That does not mean it understands light. So this is not merely a story about tools. Maybe theory has not died. Maybe it is waiting to return in another form, not as manifesto, not as intellectual decoration, but as criteria, as judgment, as the ability to decide what matters when everything can be generated. What remains valuable now is not the speed of production, but the depth of discernment. In the age of AI, the architect is not saved by making more images. The architect is saved by seeing more clearly. And perhaps the future of theory begins there. Maybe this is where the real crossing begins. My name is Sahil. I'm an architect, but I like to be called as a generalist. For me, this shift was never abstract. It did not arrive as a trend report or a conference theme. It arrived through practice, through work, through the friction of real projects, real clients, real uncertainty, through the growing realization that architecture was entering a new cognitive condition. I had already been moving between architecture, research, writing, image making, and technological experimentation. But at a certain point, the question changed. It was no longer, can AI produce something interesting? The real question became, what kind of intelligence is entering the design process? And what does it change in us? I could feel the ground moving, not only in architecture, but in the broader history of human thought. You hear it in Neil Leach's provocation that It is as though the Earth has been invaded by an invisible, super intelligent alien species. You feel it when you look back at moments outside architecture. Kasparov defeated by Deep Blue, Lee Sedol confronting AlphaGo, not because a machine won a game, but because a certain image of human exceptionalism cracked in public. The defeat was symbolic long before it was technical. And then there are the voices from inside AI itself. Jeffrey Hinton warning us that intelligence may be advancing faster than our ethical and political capacity to govern it. Demis Hassabis speaking of AI systems that may reshape science, labor, creativity, and risk at civilizational scale. This is where the tools stopped feeling like tools alone. And today, with the emergence of agentic systems like OpenClaw or Claude Code, the philosophical implications deepen again. Because now we are not only dealing with generation, we are dealing with delegation. Not only with outputs, but with intention like behavior. Not only with images, but with systems that can pursue goals, change tasks, and increasingly simulate agency itself. That is the crossing. The crossing from tool to collaborator, from interface to actor, from assistance to epistemic disturbance. And once you cross that threshold, you cannot return to architecture unchanged. So the only honest response was not fear, but investigation. Investigation for us did not mean fascination without design. It meant asking a harder question. If these systems are now part of the design environment, then what patterns of practice allow us to work with them without surrendering judgment? At RBD SAI Lab, our approach was never about prompting for novelty alone. It was about structuring thought, about using AI not to replace architectural intelligence, but to pressure test it, multiply it, redirect it, and at times even confront it. One of the earliest places this became visible was in our pitch for Kalaruni Resort. That project was not a gimmick. It was an early proof that AI could begin participating in the conceptual staging of an architectural narrative, not as an architect, but as a cognitive instrument inside the pitch process. It helped us see faster, frame faster, test visual propositions faster. But the judgment, the sequencing, the filtration, the spatial reading remained deeply human. Over time, the pattern deepened. Language models sharpened brief interpretation. Image generators expanded visual thinking. Node-based workflows gave us a way to build more complex chains of iteration and control. And tools like NanoBanana reveal something especially important, that images are not merely outputs to be admired. They can become a medium of thought. This matters because in architecture, we do not only think through words, we think through plans, sections, sketches, diagrams, renders, references, atmospheres, fragments. AI-based image systems, when handled critically, begin to participate in that visual cognition. But this only becomes meaningful if the workflow matures beyond seduction. That is why we move toward advanced pipelines, hybrid workflows, linked reasoning, iterative refinement, and cross-medium conversation between text, image, geometry, and critique. And as these methods evolved, they began to enter real projects, including ongoing work where AI did not merely help us visualize architecture, but also support conceptual thinking around lighting, atmosphere, materiality, and experiential sequencing. That evolution became even richer through my partnership with Martin Klassen. Because once architecture and lighting began to speak to each other through these systems, another layer of intelligence entered the room. And from there, speculation was no longer fantasy, it became a method. Speculation is often misunderstood in architecture. People assume it is the opposite of seriousness. But sometimes, speculation is where seriousness becomes visible first. Luminal Futures, the Photon Pavilion, emerged from that space, not as fantasy for its own sake, but as an attempt to think through architecture, lighting, systems, and intelligence together, before the profession had found stable language for doing so. By then, our research had already begun to crystallize around a larger idea that AI was not merely a tool of automation, but a catalyst for architectural thinking. That proposition, which we later articulated more formally in our paper, Beyond Automation, AI as a catalyst for architectural thinking, had already started changing the way I approached design problems. not by making them easier, but by making them stranger, richer, and more interconnected. The Proton Pavilion became one expression of that shift, a speculative, architectural, and luminous system where form, light, and intelligence just create one continuous environment. The pavilion was conceived less as a static object and more as a living spatial instrument, where architecture, atmosphere, and responsive systems unfold together. It was also deeply personal. The project did not emerge from nowhere. It emerged from dialogue, from research, from repeated collisions between architecture and lighting design. And when the work entered the Lux Futurum context, a global program that identifies future-oriented concepts that are pushing the boundaries of design, thinking, technology, and innovation, and later won the award, the meaning of that moment was larger than recognition. It suggested that the profession was ready, or at least willing, to entertain new hybrids, where architecture, lighting, speculative systems, and AI-driven thought could be treated not as separate disciplines, but as one continuous field. In Shanghai, presenting the work, I could feel that strange feedback loop. Research becoming project, project becoming discourse, discourse becoming public argument. That is when you realize a speculative design is not just an image of the future, it is an instrument for thinking in public. And once speculation begins to produce method, it also begins to produce responsibility. The deeper I went into AI and architecture, the more it became clear that lighting design would not remain. In some ways, it may be one of the fields most radically affected, because AI can already imitate the appearance of light with astonishing ease. Mood, glow, contrast, softness, drama, all of it can be simulated in seconds. But the appearance of light is not the same as the intelligence of light. Real lighting design still lives in glare control, luminance hierarchy, beam logic, adaptation, controls, maintenance, sequencing, occupancy, and perception over time. It lives in the gap between what looks convincing in an image and what actually performs in lived space. This is where my partnership with Martin became especially important. Our conversations gradually evolved into a shared inquiry. How do we help lighting designers engage AI seriously? Not as spectators, not as victims of disruption, and not as passive consumers of software, but as authors of a new kind of practice. That inquiry eventually led us to co-create AI fundamentals for lighting designers. But the course was never the starting point, it was the consequence. It emerged because the questions had already become unavoidable. How should a lighting studio integrate AI into design thinking without reducing itself to image production? How should it rethink workflow, authorship, client communication, and internal value? What becomes the differentiator of an AI-driven lighting practice when everyone has access to the same tools? The answer is not speed alone. It is not prompt literacy alone. It is not the ability to generate prettier atmospheres. The real differentiator is judgment made scalable, a practice that can think across design, communication, concept development, systems, controls, narrative, and future positioning faster and more intelligently than before without losing rigor. That is where leverage begins. Not in replacing the designer, but in amplifying the designer who knows what they are doing. The firms that understand this early will not merely survive AI, they will redefine the value proposition of design itself. And yet, even that is not the end of the question. There is a risk now, a real one, that a generation of designers may inherit tools of immense power without inheriting the depth of judgment required to use them well. That image may outrun thought, that speed may outrun wisdom, that the profession, in trying to stay current, may accidentally become shallow. But there is another possibility that this moment forces us to become clearer, more interdisciplinary, more reflective, more honest about what design intelligence actually is. Rabindranath Tagore once wrote, "Don't limit a child to your own learning, for he was born in another time." That line matters now more than ever, because the architect, the lighting designer, the student, the studio, the practice, all of them are now being born into another time. The question is not whether that time will contain AI. It already does. The question is whether we will meet it lazily or lucidly. At RBD SAI Lab, we have tried to meet it through work, through projects, through consulting, through teaching, through field testing ideas, not only in theory, but across real contexts, real clients, real collaborations, across India and beyond. Not as futurists standing outside practice, but as a generalist design ecosystem willing to test, revise, and think in motion. This film is not a conclusion, it is a marker, a pause inside a much longer transition. Because perhaps the future of design will belong neither to those who resist the machine blindly, nor to those who surrender to it too quickly. Perhaps it will belong to those who can still think, still see, still judge, still remain human inside acceleration. With that, I leave the next words to Martin.
Well, I every time I deal with Sahil, I have to catch my breath because everything moves so fast. And I think the movie that you just saw also expresses his immense speed in which he thinks and does things. And I'm legitimately there saying, oh, calm down, not too much. Let's do this step by step. But I think the balance is a bit what you will understand is what we are fighting, because with AI, obviously we can bring in speed, but at the same time, we also need to stay grounded, make sure that we have the necessary oversight, and that whatever comes out of the AI is something that's buildable and realizable. And that's what we have done. If you're interested in the course, the QR code is also at the reception. I'm here to take any questions if you want. I'm not the technical guy, but if you have any questions about what you just have seen, I can imagine there might be some. Feel free to fire them off, and I'll see if I can answer them.
Hi, thank you so much. Very fast and interesting video. So they were saying, it was saying that there were several true projects that were actually built thanks to AI. Do you have some true pictures of these AI-driven?
I'm sure that Sahil can provide that to you. These are his projects. We only know each other for about 1.5 years, and we have been working on creating the course. In the process, I'm also trying to teach him lighting and what real life design, as I see it and have known it, is all about. But yes, the projects that he shared, I think that he has either done in research, and some of them are in the process of being realized. You can let me know later on. I can give you some context, and then he can answer you directly what stage the projects are and whether they're realized or not. Yeah, but it's definitely that. So he has moved his practice totally to AI architecture, right? So AI is now an intrinsic part of his workflow, how he works, and you can see with the speed of. He did this in 5 days. Last Thursday, I thought you have to do something, and Tuesday he sent me this movie already. So you can imagine that that's impossible. And he used his cloned voice to produce it. It was not his own voice; it was his cloned voice. So you can imagine what AI can do to speed up the process. Any other question? You can always reach out to me afterwards as well. If there's no further question. Okay, having said that, we have 2 more speakers to join us here on stage. The first one will be, sorry, you want to introduce?
So
Thank you anyhow.
we have seen a beautiful shift